So I want to ask you, Frankenstein, my favorite sequence is the sequence in the farmhouse, the old blind man, and you really let Jacob Elordi's character grow. Like, you want to give a lot of space. What was the process of shooting that allow his character to develop and grow in that pivotal sequence?
Well, the great thing about the movie stylistically is that I tried to make each of the episodes self-contained and shot in a different style. So the childhood is very stately, is very Barry Lyndon-esque. Then his youth is very active, the camera is moving everywhere. And then the creature's tale is a fairy tale. And there are barely any words because the creature has almost no words. So it's purely cinema. We follow him, we see him do, we see him hear, listen, so the passage is different and the camera style is different. So how you land is by sharing as opposed to qualifying. You don't qualify, you just experience it with him.
And the dungeon was much darker though. How did you want to approach shooting the dungeon scene?
Well, what you do, first of all, you build the dungeon for him. So the colors are, he belongs to the dungeon. It's the same color palette. The arches are too low, so he looks really, really tall. There is a sort of a womb-like quality to it, and he's birthed through a canal. So, you plan everything a little bit for him to be expelled into the world through the birth canal.
So you first read the Guillermo script, which is brilliant. What was your biggest concern about how are we going to capture our own Frankenstein look, but also honor so many previous versions?
I don't think I stopped to be concerned. I just consumed it and started researching. Honestly, everything was of utmost importance, and there was a big learning curve to build the ship, to build the lab, to understand the era, the science of it at the time, to make it real and yet fantastical. So not concerning, but just I think getting Guillermo's vision, getting his take and doing it well is, my motivation.
I did love the whole long sequence with the old blind man and where Jacob Elordi's character begins to grow as a person. How do you want to approach giving that kind of set, showing a place, because it's been so dark for him beforehand, a place for him to grow in kind of almost a homey setting?
That set in particular was very based on nature, on natural building techniques of stone and plaster and grass and wood shingles. So to me that was like the creature is more connected, even though he's man-made, more connected to nature than anything in our man-made, any other man, Victor himself. So I think that was kind of a guiding principle for that. Make it warm and natural and historic, beautiful.
And for you, how was the wedding scene? It's one of my favorite scenes of the film. What were your thoughts about that wedding scene?
I mean, the wedding scene, really that was down to our set decorator and the locations that we had. Shane View did a phenomenal job sort of putting that together.
And the snow dress.
Yeah.
We had to do a snow dress basically overnight. And so we were all laying snow blankets.
Everybody.
Everybody.
Yeah.
We have a lot of students that watch our show, and I'm curious, is there one particular scene or set that might not be the grand set that you say you should study that because we're really proud of something we accomplished?
Harlander's bathroom.
Oh.
I just, because it was a set, it was our smallest set, although it wasn't tiny, but I felt like I had to really draw in the locations and where we were for that. What about you?
Yeah, no, that's a great one. The other one I would add to it maybe would be the captain's quarters.
Yeah.
Where there was such an intimate environment that kind of had to be designed in such a way where it had to come apart into all of these different pieces to facilitate the shooting and the crane and everything else. That's one, I think, to look at what ended up on film compared to how we constructed the overall design of the set, it would be one to look at.
And an interesting note about that is, Guillermo will embrace the low-hanging beams of a set like that, where Jacob Elordi, who's very tall, has to duck. And I pointed this out to him, which we've done in the past on Nightmare Alley, had the same thing in a bungalow set. And he said, no, the actors have to act in the space, and let's let him do his thing with his body. Have to duck.
I was especially struck by the scene, the long scene with the old blind man, because you had to develop, the character was growing and developing emotionally and physically. What were the challenges like growing the character from the original dark side of him to more the lighter side?
Well, it was actually the opposite way, wasn't it? He was very much a baby in the first half of the movie. He wasn't dark at first. He was innocent. You know, it was only after like the hunters and stuff had abused him that he physically fought back and reacted like any animal would. So it was a nice progression, because what we did it in stages. We designed it. Very obviously, the bald version was the baby, and then we had like the teenage version where his hair was growing out, and then the full adult with the long hair, more matured hair. And at that point, part of it was, you know, he'd become so abused by the world, his colours and his skin got darker and tougher. And then at the very final scene, when he finally realizes that he is going to live and he should want to live, you know, due to Victor's encouragement, he embraces his son, and then we went back to nice pastel colours all over again to get him back to youth again.
It starts on the son too, when he's first awakened.
That's right.
Victor first teaches him son, and then it ends on the son.
And it ends on the son too. So he's back to his colours again.
It does seem rare that often you don't get to develop a character, especially a monster. A monster is usually a monster. What was the process of working with Jacob, though, to kind of create the look, make him comfortable, and also find the look perfect for him?
Well, Jacob came in very late to the game. I mean, we'd started work on another actor for 8 months, and then Jacob came in and we only had a few weeks. But Jacob's persona, because people want to talk about Jacob's physique, how he's physically perfect, this was playing 6'5". Yes, he was, and we understand that as artists. But also Jacob's soul came through. So once I met him and we talked to him, and Meg and I tried to wig on him and teeth and stuff, then I had to sculpt his face after meeting him. So then I knew his soul. I thought I knew the man I was putting the makeup on, which alters the design somewhat. So no, Jacob Elordi, you know, for me, made this movie. He was fantastic.
Does that help you, knowing that his eyes could tell everything?
Oh, of course. He doesn't have to say anything. He just look, and his soul comes through it.
Movie,
That's how he truly is. He had such a love, a respect, and a sense of reverence for the project. He knew, he understood the assignment, and he passed them flying colors.
He really wanted to do this part, you know. Guillermo told him the makeup was going to take so long to do. You have to treat it as a sacrament and become this creature. You have to go through this abuse almost to become. And Jacob took him at his word. And again, in over 56 applications, sometimes 10 hours a day, that young man never complained once. He's a consummate professional.
Now, can you confirm the truth, though? That's how Jacob looks in real life? As a Frank, and you really didn't have to do much. You had to make him more look nice for the red carpets. Is that true or false?
Actually, Matt, even though Meg and I, we molded up Jacob and we made him up every day, every morning when that young man walked in the trailer, it was kind of a shock, because we spent all the time with the creature and not with the actor.
Oh boy, yeah.
So even at the end of the night, once he stepped out of the steam room and he's all cleaned up, we were like, who is this guy?
He's so young.
So used to the creature. Yeah, it was always a shock.
We saw him more as Adam than as himself.
You read the script of Frankenstein. Guillermo has a lot of very specific ideas. What was your biggest challenge when you thought, how am I going to pull this off?
You know what, I've been working with Guillermo for like a number of films now. We've almost got a shorthand now. He's brought this team together of people that he's curated to understand the way he works and what he wants to see. So it was quite straightforward. The biggest challenge is working with the cast members and working through what they wanted to do with their characters. It was an incredible experience, and I'm so grateful for it.
Now, Oscar Isaac goes through a big transformation throughout the movie, declines, obviously. How did you approach his look that changed as he became more evil and aggressive and darker?
Well, funnily enough, the way a movie is shot, we started off with that look. Coincidentally, because of weather and some extreme circumstances, so we actually established that right off the bat. So it was actually a matter of working backward and taking Oscar back to his handsome self.
And then Mia was beautiful in the film. What was the process of creating a look for her and working with her to create her look?
My biggest influence for Mia's look for Elizabeth came from working with Kate Hawley, our costume designer. Her inspiration was very very 70s and rock and roll in terms of her fabrics that she was choosing and the designs for things. So I leaned really heavily into the Biba influence from the 70s. A lot of the makeup that we did for all the women in the show had to read under veils, and that was also another big influence. So everything was sort of heightened and dramatic and sort of operatic.
So when you first read the script, I'm sure you loved it. But what was your like, oh my God, how are we going to pull this scene off or this character off?
Boy, that's almost every character with Guillermo. I think it was just the weather, the exteriors, and a lot of them have transitions in their looks. And I think we're up against the weather in Canada sometimes with the snow and the rain.
I think one of the most critical sequences is in the farmhouse with the old man and the blind man, because that's where Jacob character grows, and you have the blind and the great characters. What was the process of kind of evolving the looks throughout that sequence?
Well, Mike Hill did the creature and did everything with the creature. The blind man, David Bradley, had a wig on and very specialized makeup by Jordan. And so he wore his wig every day. And the hunters all wore wigs as well, the men.
Yeah, the men were wigs, but everything else, whatever we could do manually, like in the real hair, so we actually did it on a day.
We had a lot of Hungarian folk images for our research.
Eastern European, like the kind of folks from 19th century.
My favorite scene is the wedding scene. Well, the near wedding scene, like to say. What were the challenges doing the look for the wedding? Mia, Oscar, and the guests?
I remember the guests being in the estate that we were filming in, and there's real candles because Guillermo likes everything real. So you see all these flames, and then you see all the women with all their veils and wigs and costumes and crowded, but it was very beautiful.
Guillermo likes everything practical, and so the chandeliers above in the wedding were real candles. So we were picking wax out of all the wigs at the end of the night.
So welcome. We're going to be talking some Frankenstein with the editor.
Yeah.
So Guillermo has a very singular vision. There's been a ton of different Frankenstein versions. What were the conversations with Guillermo at the beginning to decide what version this would be, and why did you find appealing about his vision of Frankenstein?
You know, it's funny, on this film, there had been a long gap between the last time that I worked with Guillermo and on this one. And I got sent the script, you know, I had messaged with Guillermo off and on, and then I went in for what I thought was an interview, and I showed up, and he was like, "Oh, hey, Evan, yeah, you've got the job." And then he left about a minute later, and the word Frankenstein we didn't really talk about at all. But reading the script, you know, it was very clear that like Guillermo was going to take Mary Shelley's story and be faithful to it in many ways, but also put his perspective on it and put his spin on it. And you know, and really tell a story about empathy and forgiveness that is very poignant and emotional.
Oh, well, you definitely felt it throughout the whole entire film. So it's almost more optimism
Yeah.
than other previous versions. All right, so let's go right into the beginning. So what was the decision like? How to open the film? What did you want? You have to stamp your tone and style. What was your thoughts on how we opened the film?
I mean, in this film, one of the ways that we're true to the novel is by starting with the framework of the ship. So we have the prelude where we meet the ship captain and the ship that's stuck in the ice, and introduce the creature. And you know, you want to establish the creature, the threat of the creature that kind of everybody expects, so that later on, when the creature breaks into the cabin and says, "Wait, I'm going to tell you my story." You know, it's a little bit of a twist. It's a little bit of something unexpected, and you know, we don't want to show those cards too early in the film.
So in a way, you wanted to set the audience up to expect the traditional Frankenstein,
Correct.
what they've been used to in movies.
Yeah.
Actually, more based on the movies anyway, the people's perception.
Yes.
All right, so then obviously one of the critical scenes in any Frankenstein is the Dr. Frankenstein showing, you know, his science to all the other doctors. Mm-hmm. What went in that sequence? Because you really do have to establish Oscar Isaac, you know, in that world very quickly and get.
Yeah, I mean, that was one of the first scenes that we shot, and it was such a fun scene to edit together because he's a rock star in that scene, and he's flamboyant and he's showing off and he's arrogant, and you get the first sense of what path he's going to go down and the costs that the lengths that he will go to in order to achieve his goals. And so he's in this room full of professors. He's in a disciplinary tribunal, and he does not care. he is showing off his work with pride. He's not trying to bend to to what the panel wants him to do. And I think that's ultimately also the thing that convinces Harlander that this is the right guy, that he will achieve his goals no matter what.
I love the Christoph Waltz, Oscar Isaac sequences, the seduction and playing into that thing. What were your thoughts on getting that? Because again, you have to seduce Oscar Isaac pretty quickly, and Christoph Waltz really delivered, I thought, in those sines.
Yeah, there was actually the moment at the end of the Evelyn table scene where Oscar says, "I'm going to think about it," and that was in and out for a while. But we wanted to draw it out because we really wanted the moment where Victor commits to getting into this relationship with Harlander to be in the lab when he sees what the future of the tower can be, and starts planning all the batteries and where everything's going to go, and you really see the gears start to turn in that moment. So it was important to withhold his participation in this agreement until you see him really get excited about it and be in the place that it's all going to happen.
It also strengthens Harlander's character, his ability to win him over.
Yes.
Like he had to work it, but still had power. I thought it was brilliant, that little choice.
Yes, and Harlander can't reveal his hand too soon. Right. So he desperately needs Victor to agree to this, but he can't appear to be desperate to need Victor to agree to it because he doesn't want those questions that would come after that.
We could talk a little bit of waltz. It seems like a waltz. There's a lot of waltzing in this movie.
There is a lot of waltzing in this movie, yeah.
Indirectly. That leads to what we thought, because my director Indira and I we got to see the film. Mia Goth and Oscar, I thought the first scene when they meet while they're eating, and she challenges them, and the great confessional scene.
Yeah.
That was a fun scene. But you really only had a couple of moments like that, and to establish the relations enough to drive the rest of the story. So what were your thoughts of running those sequences, introducing Mia Goth's character and their relationship, because you know how pivotal it is especially in the third act.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important right from the very beginning to establish that Victor is captivated by Elizabeth, and that the beautiful shot where she's in Harlander's apartment, she's holding the skull, and she turns around and she's wearing that gorgeous dress, and you really see that on Victor's face. And so I think you buy from that point onwards that this is a person he's interested in, that he is also going to to pursue, and as we move along through the story, to the detriment of the goals of of his research. And then having that conflict at the dinner table between Elizabeth and Victor, I think only makes Victor more energetic and more aggressive, about pursuing her, because she's challenging him.
And he's not used to that.
But I think he also respects it, and he and enjoys it. And so it is a waltz between them, and we get to a very literal waltz in the bistro scene, to establish that he is spending more time pursuing her than he is doing the research, and he's also, very meanly sidelined his brother off at the lab to take care of all of the logistics, while he's hanging out with his brother's fiance. So, I think that establishing all of those tensions, early on and doing it, quickly, is important for the conflict in the film and important for establishing, their relationships and how they later break down.
One of our favorite editing sequences, actually we might have saying that a couple of times, but this one we loved something we'd never seen before. While he's building the monster, it is a waltz, and it's optimistic, where we would expect it to be darker. And then the Christoph Waltz confrontation happens, and then the darkness of that. What was the thoughts going into that sequence, starting with kind of an optimistic waltz, and then driving to where he's going mad and the corruption?
Yeah, I mean, when he's assembling the body, he's in his element. He's having fun, and it was important that you get the sense that for him he's in a groove, and this is a beautiful thing. He is an artist in that scene, and so the choice of the music of using a waltz that Alexander composed for us was really. That really helped set the tone of that scene very effectively. And then, yes, you go into the next scene, and that's where Harlander reveals, the twist, the piece of information he's been holding back, that he wants to be placed into the new body, and live, have an eternal life, even though he can't have that life in his current body. And so I think having those, it's always a good thing when you can have high highs and low lows and conflict, and then the time pressure of the storm coming in and the lightning, and adding all of that to the point where it's just chaos, nothing goes to plan. All of that makes for a really dynamic sequence.
Now, was there any temptation, or did you have to talk Guillermo out of, we need an Igor character pulling the lever, or the Buzzy, the Electroids thing, or did you guys say from the beginning, we're not doing that?
It was pretty much from the beginning, we're not doing that. There were always nods to the Frankensteins that we know, the other Frankenstein films, and sometimes they stayed in and sometimes they got cut out. At one point there was Oscar did say it's alive, but not in the way that we all hear in our heads. But it felt like it was distracting in the moment, and it wasn't really our film, and we didn't need to make that reference at that time. But there are references everywhere to the other films.
But then actually we have a major tone shift because the storyline POV changes to the monster. What was the process of editing that? And as we were talking about, the sequence was so beautiful with the old blind man, which I know is historic, but it was really showed so much humanity and sweetness. What was the process of now turning? We had a dark thing going now where there is some light.
Yeah, I mean we made a very intentional choice of slowing the movie down at that point, because you need to give the creature time to develop, to experience the world, to make a friend, to learn what violence is. One of the questions that we had to solve was, at what point do we cut back to the creature? So when the creature's tail starts, where do we pick it up? And picking it up from the moment that the tower is lit on fire and he has to start fending for himself and escaping by himself, seemed like a good place to do it. And then, I think that's one of my favorite sections of the film, is just, watching the creature learn and discover and be treated with care and kindness, and then ultimately heartbreak. For me, I think one of my favorite scenes in the film is when he goes back to the destroyed tower and picks up all the shattered, all the torn pieces of paper, and realizes, how he came into being. So I think that you need to spend time with the creature, a significant amount of time with the creature up until that point, in order to then feel the heartbreak in that scene.
And also says that because Oscar Isaac should have been the father.
Yes.
And failed from the beginning. It was such a sweet, tender thing. It didn't feel. I loved it because it just felt natural to me.
Yeah. I mean, there's a running theme in the film of fathers and sons, and and as much as Victor suffered under his own father's parenting, he wasn't able to do anything different when the time came.
So then, just talking about waltzing, we did like the wedding. We have a joyous wedding, a waltz.
Yeah.
Oscar busts into me and goes, bridal, and then turns dark, and of course the tragedy. What would your thoughts go in the sequence there? Because you start light, and then Oscar's Dr. Madness happens, and then the tragedy happens.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was important to give you the sense that maybe Victor had seen the error of his ways. And so you have the scene with William where he's where they are reconciling a little bit, and then he goes into Elizabeth's dressing room, and says, like, I'm sorry, and I love my brother very much, and Elizabeth just sees right through him, and then Victor goes into his own bedroom and has this unexpected confrontation with the creature, which is both validating for he succeeded beyond the level that he thought he did, but also he still can't bring himself, to show compassion.
Yeah, that was so sweet. And then at the end, which I thought, going back, forgetting the compassion, the nice little twist is there is actually forgiveness and hope. Yeah. What were your thoughts on the ending sequence, like putting that together? Was it a long struggle to find that balance, and how you wanted to on the ship?
It was. Our actors are amazing, so the scene came together, very quickly. But it was, editorially, we have to. That's one of those instances. That's one of those scenes where you have to make sure that you, as the editor, are not getting in the way of what's happening in the scene. So we held long in places. We wanted to really make sure that that all of the emotion and all of the chemistry between Jacob and Oscar, really comes through, because it's an important moment of forgiveness between these two characters. And so we had a long version of that scene, and that mostly stayed in. And I'd say that what's left is probably 90% of what we shot, because it was so powerful, and you leave that scene in tears, and you can't help but feel for both of the characters in that scene, and plus the captain, who also learns that he should not pursue his goals at all costs. And I think when you just getting to that line of perhaps now we can both be human, is a really moving moment between them.
Oh, it was beautiful. And again, the expectation was the opposite going into the movie for me.
Yes.
That's what was nice, the version of it.
Yeah.
So then there's obviously some visual effects, of course. Mm-hmm. But what was your initial reaction when you first saw the dailies of the wonderful costumes, the production design, the real sets and the real costumes when you first saw it, and how do you think that really helped you having more grounded in reality visuals?
Yeah, I mean that's one of the benefits of working on a Guillermo del Toro movie, is that he hires true artisans and craftspeople to make all these things, and cares about making sure that you have a set that you can explore and interact with, and you have handmade costumes that have details in them that you may not even really pick up on what the detail is, but if you go and ask Guillermo, he'll give you a 20-minute answer about why the detail in Elizabeth's dress is related to like a blood cell or something like that. It's inspiring to be editing close to the sets, which I was able to do on this film. So I could go explore, I could go talk to Tamara, the production designer, or Kate, the costume designer. And really immerse myself in what they were doing, so that when the dailies come in, I'm familiar with with the lay of the land, and it really allows me to just sort of forget for a minute about any visual effects that we might need, and cut the scene as it comes in.
And one of the questions is, so overall, looking back on the film, what was the most challenging scene to put together for you? It could be even a small scene. What was the one that took a lot of you wrapping your head around, and also you might be most proud of, wow, I pulled that one off?
Yeah, well, let me think about most challenging for a little bit. I'll tell you the one that we recut the most, which is the montage starting with the bistro where they start dancing, and then we go into to Oscar spending time, or Victor spending time with Elizabeth, and William at the tower. That, we did, at least 50 versions of that. And in that scene, as any editor knows, when you have a montage that's very closely tied to the music that you're cutting with, every small change requires a recut of music. And I was also editing the music on this, at least the temp music on this. And so every time that we would recut that, then I'd be like, okay, Guillermo, give me 20 minutes. I have to go figure out how to patch the cue. In terms of the what was challenging, the challenge on this editorially was doing what I had to do quickly, because Guillermo likes to come in 2 hours before a crew call every day and edit the scene that he shot the day before. So I would come in 4 hours before call, and I would do the edit, so by the time he came in, we had something to talk about. The great thing is, because he's so directed and he so knows what he wants, you can look at his dailies and you can pretty easily interpret, this is where he wants me to be in this scene at this point, and then we'll cut over here. And so there's not a lot of ambiguity. Sometimes on another film you might get 8 hours of dailies, for a 2-minute scene, and then have to figure out how am I going to put this together. But he's very specific, and he knows what he wants. So the challenge is actually cutting something for him that surprises him, and then getting him to accept it. And sometimes he does, and sometimes he's like, oh, that works, but let's do it the way that I thought.
Well, thanks so much for joining us. And
thank you.